They locked a human and an alien princess together. Her plan was to pretend they were mates. The door slammed shut before I even hit the floor. I caught myself on my hands, palms burning against cold metal, and looked up at a cell that smelled like recycled oxygen and something faintly chemical, like hospitals crossed with engine coolant. The walls glowed with a dim blue bioluminescence I had never seen in any human-built station. 4 walls, no window, one drain in the corner that I chose not to think about. My name is Caleb Voss. I am a cargo pilot. I am 29 years old, and approximately 4 minutes ago, I was minding my own business eating a freeze-dried sandwich when a Krethian warship locked a tractor beam onto my hauler and pulled me in like a fish on a hook. I had barely gotten to my feet when the door opened again and someone else came through. She came through fast, like she had been thrown, and unlike me, she did not stumble. She landed in a low crouch, caught her balance on one hand, and was upright in under a second. Fluid, practiced, like falling was just another form of standing. She was tall, silver blue skin that caught the bioluminescent wall light and threw it back like polished metal. 4 fingers on each hand, eyes the color of amber that had cracked down the middle, and when the light hit them, they shifted like there were embers inside. Her clothes were torn at the shoulder and dusty at the hem, but even like that, they looked like something that belonged behind velvet rope in a museum. She looked at me the way you look at a problem you did not expect to find in an already terrible day. "Human," she said. "Guilty," I said. "Caleb, you?" She did not answer. She walked the perimeter of the cell instead, running one hand along the wall, checking the door seams with her fingertips, pressing her palm flat against the ceiling panel in the corner. Methodical, calm. She was scanning the cell the way a professional scans a room, not the way a frightened person does. I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and waited. After 3 minutes of silence, she sat down on the opposite side of the cell and looked at me directly for the first time. "My name is Sael," she said. "I am the 3rd daughter of the Doraketh line, and we are both going to die in this cell, unless you are more useful than you look." I considered that for a moment. "I'm fairly useful," I said. "What did you have in mind?" She explained it quickly and without sentiment. She had been in transit to a political bonding ceremony, a marriage alliance her family had arranged to stabilize a border dispute. Somewhere between departure and destination, a faction called the Orthodoxy had intercepted her ship, killed her escort, and put her here. The Orthodoxy were isolationists. They hated the alliance her marriage would create. They wanted the old empire back, closed borders and hard laws, and none of the cooperation that the current Sovereignty Council was building. The commander of this ship, a man named Veth, was Orthodoxy. He intended to ensure she never arrived at her ceremony. "So why are you still alive?" I asked. "Because killing a royal daughter quietly requires careful timing," she said. "And because he has not yet decided how to do it, without creating a record that destroys him. But he will decide soon." "And me?" "You are a loose thread, a human in Krethian space without authorization. He will deal with you when it is convenient." Great. I was a loose thread. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "There is a law, old law, written into the Sovereignty Legal Code 400 years ago. A bonded pair cannot be separated, interrogated independently, or eliminated without a joint tribunal. The tribunal requires witnesses from both bloodlines. It is a sacred protection. Veth cannot touch a bonded pair without creating exactly the kind of public record that destroys him." I looked at her. "You want to fake a bonding," I said. "I want to survive," she said. "And since you are here, and you are not dead yet, I am extending you the same offer." "What does a bonding look like? To them, I mean. How do they verify it?" She explained that too. Bonded Krethian pairs showed a resonance mark, a bioluminescent pattern that spread across both partners' skin. It was biological, triggered by prolonged proximity and shared stress chemistry. "Something in the body's response to deep emotional connection," she said, without any expression at all. "So it shows up on the skin," I said. "Yes, and a human wouldn't have it." "Correct." I rolled up my left sleeve. Under the cold blue wall light, my forearm caught the glow and held it. A faint shimmer, pale silver white, running from my wrist to my elbow. Sael went very still. Kepler Station, I said. I grew up there. The air recyclers ran on modified algae that interfered with human skin pigmentation. They gave us gene therapy inoculations every 6 months to manage it. Side effect is that under UV-heavy light sources, some of us glow a little. It fades in normal light. But in here, with these walls... She crossed the cell in 3 steps, crouched in front of me, and pressed her forearm against mine without asking. Her bioluminescence was soft and blue. Mine was pale and silver. Where they met, pressed together at the skin, the colors blended into something that looked layered, intentional. She pulled back and stood. "It will not fool a physician," she said. "Does Veth have a physician on this ship?" A pause. "No." "Then let's use what we have." The guard came an hour later to take her for questioning. He opened the door with a UV lamp in his hand. Standard Krethian equipment, bright and cold. The light hit us both. My arm was against hers. The shimmer bloomed. The guard stopped. He looked at our arms. He looked at her face. He looked at mine. He took 1 step backward and reached for his communication device without saying a word. Sael watched him go, with the expression of someone who had just played the correct card at exactly the right moment. Veth himself came 12 minutes later. He was not what I expected. He was not loud or physically intimidating. He was composed and quiet, with the kind of stillness that powerful people develop when they have spent years making difficult decisions. He stood in the doorway of our cell and looked at the 2 of us, and said nothing for a long time. "This is impossible," he said finally. "Cross-species resonance has been theorized for 3 centuries, Sael said. Her voice was the temperature of deep space. "You should read more, Commander." Veth looked at me specifically. I met his eyes and said nothing. Cargo pilots learn very quickly that silence is often the only leverage you have. He left, the door locked. We waited. "That bought us time," Sael said. "How much?" "Enough to escape, or not enough to matter, one of the 2. She was already moving. She ran her fingers along the door seam again, this time from the inside, checking the locking mechanism. I pulled my multi-tool from my boot. They had taken my jacket, my communicator, and the small emergency kit I kept in my belt. They had not checked my boot. People never checked boots. She looked at the tool. "What can you do with that?" "Depends what's behind that panel." I pointed to the ventilation cover in the upper corner of the wall. "What's the ship layout? I need to know where the secondary power relay is." She knew the ship. Not because she had been given a tour, but because she had spent the past hours memorizing the sounds coming through the walls. Footsteps, mechanical cycling, the rhythm of pressure changes. She had mapped it acoustically like a person who had survived by paying attention. She told me everything. I listened. Then I said, "I need 11 minutes in the vents. Can you give me 11 minutes?" "What do I do?" "Have an emergency." She looked at me with those cracked amber eyes. "I am a princess of the Doraketh line. I know. I have never pretended to be helpless in my life. Pretend now, just for 11 minutes. A long pause. Then she said, "Go." I went. The ventilation shaft was not built for human shoulders. I made it work by exhaling everything, and pulling with my arms, and ignoring the feeling in my knees. I had once spent 40 minutes in a station recycler shaft to avoid a docking fine that I genuinely could not afford. This was better than that, slightly. The secondary power relay was exactly where she said it would be. The interface was Krethian, 4-fingered controls, symbols I could not read. But a relay is a relay. Electricity does not care what language the panel speaks. I traced the circuits with my fingers, the way my instructor at Kepler Station had taught me, following the logic of it, the way power flows from source to distribution, the way any system of this type had to be organized, because physics required it. I killed the internal sensors on Deck 7. I rerouted the cell locking mechanism to the emergency medical override, which was a separate system with a separate trigger, because on every ship in known space, medical emergencies override standard locks. It is always this way. It has to be, because emergencies do not wait for authorization. The lock on our cell clicked open. Sael was on the floor when the guards came. She was not performing distress. She had synthesized something from residue on the hem of her robe, something that made her eyes water and her skin flush, and she looked genuinely unwell. The guards panicked in the specific way that people who are supposed to prevent deaths panic when they think a death is about to happen on their watch. When the door opened and they crowded in, she stood up. She walked past all three of them at a pace that suggested she had somewhere to be and did not intend to explain herself. I met her in the corridor 30 seconds later. We ran. We argued while running, which I will admit was not efficient, but neither of us seemed able to stop. You said left. That is left. That is a wall. The left wall has the door. It did, actually. She was right. I did not say so out loud, because we were running too fast for conversation. We nearly got caught twice. The second time, I pulled her behind a bulkhead, and we pressed flat against the metal and did not breathe. 4 guards ran past so close I could hear their equipment moving. In the dark, Sael's bioluminescence was active, stress response, automatic. She could not stop it, and it lit the space between us in pale blue. I could see her face clearly. She was afraid. She was managing it with everything she had, but it was there, real and human in the way that fear is the same in every species, and she was holding herself together by the sheer force of knowing that falling apart was not an option. I did not say anything. I just looked at her and nodded once. She nodded back. We kept moving. The secondary communications relay was 1 deck up. To get there, we had to cross the main corridor, which had 2 permanent guard stations and no cover. Sael stopped us at the junction and looked at the corridor for exactly 5 seconds. "The bonding mark," she said quietly. I understood before she finished. We walked out together, her hand in mine, her posture carrying the full weight of her bloodline, my pace matching hers, step for step. 4 fingers wrapped around 4 of mine, and 1 thumb, and her hand was warmer than I expected. She announced us to the guards in Krethian. I did not understand the words, but I understood the tone, the absolute certainty of someone who has never once in her life been required to justify her presence in a room. The guards stepped back. Protocol. Old law. They could not detain a bonded pair in transit without a direct order from the commander, and that order had not come, because Veth had not yet figured out how to issue it without creating a record. We walked through. The relay room was small and smelled like hot metal. Sael spoke 4 sentences into the transmitter, crisp and clear, in the formal register of Krethian royalty, a distress code embedded in a language that loyalist ships were trained to recognize across any frequency. We did not wait to hear if anyone answered. Veth caught us in the cargo bay. He had 6 guards with him and the expression of a person who had run out of patience and had decided to accept the consequences of what came next. He stood between us and the bay door and looked at me with something that was not quite contempt and not quite curiosity. "You don't understand what you've walked into," he said. "Probably not," I said, "but I understand cargo bay pressure valves." I hit the emergency release on the atmospheric system, not the door, the pressure differential valve, the one that was supposed to equalize the bay in case of a breach. It released with a sound like a thunderclap, and the rush of air hit everything in the room simultaneously. Everyone went down, me included. I hit the floor hard on my shoulder and rolled, and I heard Sael hit the deck somewhere to my right. The guards were scattered. Veth was on his hands and knees. The ship's hull integrity alarm screamed to life, and broadcast on every frequency it had, including the frequency that the Loyalist ship, which had responded to Sael's signal 3 minutes ago, and had been closing distance ever since, was monitoring. Loyalist boarding parties do not knock. They never have. The bay door opened from outside, and 12 Sovereignty Royal Guard came through in formation, armed and moving, with the kind of coordinated precision that meant they had trained for exactly this situation. They swept the bay, they assessed. They found the commander of a Sovereignty warship on his knees, an orthodoxy conspirator caught in the middle of an act that would end his career and his freedom. The lead guard saw Sael. He dropped to one knee. She stood up, straightened what remained of her torn clothing, and began to speak. I sat against the cargo bay wall and accepted a ration bar from a guard who seemed unsure what to do with me, and I watched her dismantle Veth's entire operation in under 20 minutes. Names, dates, intercept coordinates, the chain of command within the orthodoxy, the political mechanism they had intended to use after her disappearance. She remembered everything. She had been cataloging it since the moment she was thrown into that cell. She was the most precise and thorough person I had ever seen operate under pressure, and I had spent 7 years flying cargo through some of the most chaotic stations in 3 systems. A senior official asked, diplomatically, about the bonding mark. Sale looked at me across the cargo bay. I looked at her. A survival measure, she said. It will be corrected in the record. Of course, Highness. They moved on. There were larger things to address. My ship was returned to me the following morning with a formal letter of apology for the unauthorized seizure, a letter of safe passage through all Krethian sovereign space, and a compensation transfer that was, honestly, more than I made in 6 months of cargo runs. I was doing pre-flight checks when I heard footsteps behind me. Sayel stood at the entrance to the docking corridor. She was dressed properly now, clean and composed, every inch the royal she was. She looked like she had never crawled through a ventilation shaft in her life. "You will not need to enter Krethian space again," she said. "The passage letter is for your protection, not an invitation." "I know," I said. "You were—" She paused in a way that felt deliberate, like she was selecting words carefully, unexpectedly effective. "Humans usually are," I said. "It surprises people every time." She looked at my arm. The shimmer was still there, faint in the normal docking light, almost invisible. She looked at her own hand, the one that had held mine in that corridor. "The mark," she said. It was not entirely fiction. I held her gaze for a long moment. "No," I said. "I didn't think it was." She did not say anything else. She turned and walked back down the corridor the way she had come, unhurried, head level, completely in control of every step. I finished my pre-flight checks. I strapped in. My navigation system asked me for a destination. I typed in coordinates in Krethian sovereign space. The system flagged it. No cargo registered for that route. I cleared the flag and entered the coordinates again. The engine warmed up. Somewhere across the stars, a princess who had held my hand through the worst corridor of her life was probably already back inside the machinery of duty and politics and arranged alliances, doing what her bloodline required. And I was a cargo pilot from Kepler Station, with a glowing arm and a navigation system that had stopped asking questions. I punched into the jump. Some fictions take on a life of their own. You start them to survive, and somewhere between the running and the terror and the one quiet moment in the dark where someone nods and means it, you forget where the pretending stopped. I had not forgotten. I did not think she had either. The stars stretched long and white around me, and then disappeared, and I was gone.